There are a lot of questions heading into next season for the Montreal Canadiens, and Marco D'Amico outlined 5 of the top questions, but we're going to outline our top 3 questions for the Montreal Canadiens heading into the 23-24 season, so stick around for this edition of Habs Digest. Jesse, we're going to get into the first topic here. Kirby Dach, is he the 2C of the future? But before we do, I haven't done this in a while. Quick reminder to hit subscribe if you haven't already. A ton of you guys, over 70% of you aren't subscribed, so hit the button now. We'd really appreciate it, and it'll help you find better Habs content. So, Jesse, talking about Kirby Dach. Will he establish himself as a number 2 center? As D'Amico writes, it's one of the more paramount questions for not only the success of the club, but the whole rebuild moving forward. There's a lot of uncertainty around Kirby Dach. Could he be a top 6 centerman? Or would he end up staying on the top line or maybe in more of a winger role going forward? Jesse, I'm not really sure because I feel like there's a ton of questions still left to be answered by his play on the ice. We've only seen him for one full season in Montreal, and even that one was a bit riddled by injuries. So what are your thoughts on this whole situation?
Well, looking at his past year, 38 points, getting close to 40, seeing him becoming that 50, 60 points, that starts to being in the realm of a pretty good 2C, in the NHL. So I think the Habs are right to be patient because obviously they understand the effect that he could be, as that 2C right behind Suzuki, right? So they're right to be patient because he could have a great effect there. But at the same time, I think we shouldn't take for granted the chemistry that he has with Cole Caufield and with Nick Suzuki on that first line, and also providing a lot of that size as well that is needed, and maybe some underrated, defensive acumen as well. But I think one of the most important things for me is, it matters more to me just that Kirby's playing well, whether it's on that first line or centering that second line. I just want to see him playing well. But I think making that decision early on in the season to kind of really have a stable lineup will be so important for the Habs this year.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I think, settling these guys into the roles that they'll probably play throughout the whole rebuild is kind of one of the points of this section is to get them playing it early, right? If Kirby Dach projects as a winger long term, you want to get him playing wing, whether it's with Suzuki and Caufield or on, say, the second line where him and Monahan are kind of splitting roles. You're better off to do it early. But my big concern with Kirby Dach, Jesse, it's no stranger of a concern, is something we've mentioned the whole season. It's his face-off percentage. And even a guy like Alex Newhook, who they brought in, who's also a natural center, both of these guys are not that great. I mean, Newhook a bit better than Kirby Dach, but Kirby's a sub 40% face-off guy for his career, 38% I believe last year. And I just don't see a guy like that really being a number 2C long term, because you have a guy like Monahan who last season was able to step in a lot of the time, play that wing and step into the face-off dot when you needed, but I feel like it's a detriment to the team when you can't have Kirby playing center in certain situations simply because of his lack of face-off acumen. Is that a concern to you moving forward, and does that maybe lead more credence to him playing the wing going into 2, 3, 4 years from now?
It's an excellent point, Josh, because like you said, right, we're in a puck possession league. It's so important. So many teams have used this very simple strategy to great effect for many, many years. So, of course, you're playing with a lot of skilled players, too, centering your second line. So it's so important for you to be able to get your puck to these players. Third, fourth line, it doesn't matter maybe as much if you're not as good on the draws. First and second line, very important. So I think that's going to be the big caveat in all this. And during that first month, I think that's going to be the biggest thing that they're kind of looking at is if he can do this, then by all means play the center position. But if not, we're going to definitely have to look at some other options. So you have to feel like Kirby Dach is putting in the work for this, because obviously the Habs organization has told him in no uncertain terms, it would be best for us if you're playing center. And this is kind of the one thing that's missing. He's very intelligent, very cerebral, obviously very talented. It's just that one thing is just kind of working on the draws, and if that could really unlock his game.
Yeah, I think so too. And I guess another question that maybe we won't discuss in this video, but if he's not the 2C, who is? Is it Monahan, who's almost certain to get an injury at some point in the year? Is it Newhook, an undersized center who's also not great on the faceoff dot? Yeah, maybe that's another question, this whole number 2 center as a whole. But regardless, that'll do it for this topic. Let's move on to the second one, and that's Juraj Slafkovsky. Will he bounce back? As Marco D'Amico writes, of course, his season ended prematurely, just 39 games in the season, and Juraj Slafkovsky ended up only putting up 4 goals, 6 assists, 10 points, 42 shots, plenty of hits, 53 in his 39 games, and it's not blocks per game. That's, I guess, a basketball stat. That's a typo. We'll fix that the next time, but 24 block shots. Juraj Slafkovsky put in a season that maybe Habs fans weren't so happy with, right? But at the same time, he's an 18-year-old. Jesse, this off-season with him putting in all the work on his focus, on his stamina, on all of his physical attributes, and getting more used to this North American ice, I feel like that's the most important thing for him going forward. I mean, to you, would it be a success if we just saw him be more comfortable and maybe keep up a similar level of production as last year?
Yeah, it's going to be very important for him to step up because he's getting a little bit of a grace period. But as we know here in Montreal, we're passionate. We want our players to succeed, especially that number one pick, right? You're already in a pressure environment being that number one pick. You can kind of times that by 10 right there. So we know that he has the physical capabilities. It is great that he's not just resting on his laurels, still working on his strength and conditioning, some of his main things, because he has such great tools, right? Just needs to put himself in a position to be able to do that. So great physically, very strong. But I feel for Juraj Slafkovsky, what's going to take his game to the next level is his mental game. Just kind of going to those tough areas on the ice is going to be so important. And of course, experience as well, which is why I'm not really too worried about Juraj Slafkovsky, because I feel that experience is going to play such a pivotal role in his success in the NHL, which of course, there's no way of getting around that. You just need to play the games. You need to get the reps. Now, unfortunately, last year wasn't ideal because he didn't get as much experience as maybe he could have, getting injured so early. But at the same time, I think just having a new year, we see that he's really putting in the work. So that's really encouraging for us. He's recognizing exactly what he needs to do. So kudos, to the Habs staff for really identifying what he needs to do. He's working on exactly that. So I think we have every reason to really believe he's going to be such a better player next year. And imagine a Juraj Slafkovsky bringing a stronger mental game to the player, a player who's believing in himself even more. This is now a very big player on the ice that can skate, that whips around lightning passes, and has an amazing shot to boot, right? And at 6'3", 240 pounds, he's the one now dishing out the punishment throughout the ice. So this is the player I think that we're going to see from Juraj Slafkovsky in the future.
Well, I love that. Put excellently. And I think I'm excited too. Now, you got me hyped up for next season with that. I mean, yeah, Slafkovsky, like we said, the skill is there, right? We've seen flashes of it. We saw it at the world tournaments, right? We saw it at the World Juniors. We saw it, flashes of it last year. That hard shot's not going anywhere. His ability to move around is not going anywhere. And what he's improving on are the specific weaknesses that we saw last year. But again, temper your expectations. We just want to see him be comfortable, start dishing out the heat like you were saying. But once he's comfortable on this North American ice, that's when you're going to see progression. Not very often do you see a guy going into his age 19 season really take that leap, right? That's going to happen a couple of years from now. So you got to be patient. We got to gradually see it. And yeah, maybe at some point there'll be a time where we say, is this enough? But that time is not yet, and I'm about as excited as you are. Final topic to end off the video. Is Samuel Montembeault ready to be the full-time number one? I mean, that's an interesting question. And it's a question that I feel like we can kind of answer, right? I mean, he had a ton of crazy performances in the second half of last year. He stole the number one goalie job, but it didn't stop there, Jesse. He went and backstopped Canada in the World Championships, had a shutout. Canada wins gold. He was one of the best goalies in the entire tournament. And Monty kind of came out of nowhere, right? And he stole that spot, and I feel like it's his going forward. To me, Montreal's not in a position now where we need a top goalie immediately, right? Eventually we will. That's the biggest, downside in the whole prospect pool. But you have guys like just drafted Jacob Fowler, who projects to be solid. Jakub Dobeš, we're not really sure, right? But right now, I think Monty has this spot, and for the next year or two, I don't see a reason why he is not going to be the Habs' number one goalie.
No, he's earned that respect, right? And until he kind of does something different, right? It's definitely going to be his to lose. Of course, having a great showing at the World Championship, kind of showing it's not a fluke. And when he gets a little bit of support as well, that, even his numbers can go up as well. So he was one of the best stories of this past year because, of course, this time last year, we weren't having this conversation. Sure. Montembeault wasn't that number one, for the Habs. So, the ball's really in his court, which is really all you can ask. And it has to feel great being in that position, knowing that, okay, my play this year is really going to dictate whether I'm going to be that guy going forward, whether they're going to, possibly trade me to kind of bring in a number one, or if they're going to bring in somebody kind of work as a tandem and kind of be like a 1B to me, right? So this is really up for Montembeault, for the taking. And even though it's hard to kind of reproduce that success from year to year, as a young goalie, I feel like it takes time, right, for goalies to develop. So I feel like with that experience, I don't feel like this is an outlier. I feel like this is a goalie that it's taken some time to develop. He's come into his own. He's really worked on a lot of parts of his game that he needed to. We saw the results kind of come. So I expect to see more of that. And this is going to be really interesting to see this year how he ends up playing.
Yeah, I think so too. It's a big question, right? It's our number 3 question of the year. And because if he comes out and he, for some reason, has a down year, like sometimes happens with goalies, you really never know. It's a very unpredictable position. What do the Habs do? Do you bring Cayden Primeau up, who's now, I think, waiver exempt this year? You can't really send him down. Do you trade Jake Allen for a temporary stopgap in the next 2 years? Or do you just let Monty ride it out in another year where Montreal is projected, according to, the bookies, to be a bottom 5 team again? So it's a very, very interesting point. And goaltending means a lot, especially to morale of teams, right? If you're giving up 5-6 goals a game, that can take a toll. So it'll be interesting to monitor going forward for sure. But that'll do it for this news edition of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 7K. We're almost at 6,500. We really appreciate all the support you guys have been giving us. I'm Josh Gosse for my co-host Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.